Bill, thanks for joining us. It just was a kind of a quiet Tuesday, wasn't it? It was nothing really going on yesterday to make us have to scramble and go a direction that we didn't expect to. In all seriousness, I want to come to your defense because I did to a couple of people. You put out a tweet, and I knew exactly what you meant, or at least I think I knew what you meant during this McMurphy thing, where you said, look, I'm aware of the McMurphy story, but I'm not sure what the right response is journalistically. Just look at, I'm paraphrasing what you put, look at what the Ohio State players are saying, and I think that's all that needs to be said. And people were jumping on you. What's the right response journalistically? You got to debunk the story. And I had the same reaction you did, and Stan and I talked about it yesterday. The story was so flimsy in my mind, I felt talking about it and even responding to it was validating it in some way. And I didn't even know whether to respond to it because I thought it was such a bad story. And I think that is what you were trying to say. Am I correct in that? And what would you say about it?
Yeah, and I had a follow-up tweet. Now, when I tweeted that, and again, nice to be with you again, Matt. When I tweeted that was before Dr. Drake and Gene Smith and Urban Meyer weighed in. So this was just when this story was blowing up. And Tim May and I discussed it, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what to do. And I read the story, and my my first thought was, where's the there? I mean, where's you're relying on the father who's not really close with the family, and he's obviously got a checkered past. That's kind of like, the more I thought about it, it was almost similar to like the Schiano stuff with Penn State, where it was second and third hand, and it was so flimsy that you're like, why would you give this any weight? Why would you base anything on this? And then some of the insinuations in the story, and I know Brett McMurphy just a little bit. I really don't know him at all. But he had a good reputation at one point. And I don't, here's the thing about, when I said the thing about I don't know what to do journalistically, I'm not he did the reporting, good or bad. He did it. I didn't. Trayvon Grimes is at Florida. He's not at Ohio State. I've had nothing to do with that. So I'm not in a position, at least right away, to say he's right or wrong with his reporting. He did it. I didn't. And so I don't want to cast aspersions. Until you kind of let things sink in a little bit and you weigh them in your mind a little bit and other facts come out. So that was part of my initial reluctance to kind of jump on it, and I didn't really want to give it oxygen because I just thought this is just I know it's out there,
right? But
do I need to kind of throw my logs into the fire? I didn't know, and so we talked about it, Tim and I and our bosses and all that, and we did what we did. Tim wrote a story. I thought was a good story and handle it correctly. One of the things about journalism, though, is you have to weigh what people's likely agendas are, what their credibility is, and journalism is not saying this side says this and this side says that, and I'm not getting involved. 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't equal 5. So if you have two people saying one person saying 2 + 2 = 4, and one person says 2 + 2 = 5, you don't give equal weight to the guy saying 5.
Right.
But most of the time, it's not that simple or clear cut. And so you go, well, what can I add to this, if anything? How important is this? Who can be hurt by this? And I thought some of the insinuations about the mother's illness was just awful.
I couldn't believe it. I could not believe the turns that it took. Yeah. And I know there are, I didn't know until yesterday's report, but some of the information about her past, I was like, why are you getting into this?
Right.
I just was, it was, I don't know.
Gratuitous. It was gratuitous.
It really was, and a little bit over the top. But, no, I thought you handled it well. And as I said, Stan and I had you talk about throwing logs on the fire. We're like, when we spent most of our show yesterday talking about a story that we think is crap, but we respond to what people are responding to. So I understood exactly where you were going with that. I did. It was, I don't know. It was a weird day.
And that's fine. I don't mind the criticism. I'm a big boy. I can feel good as long as I feel good about what I'm doing, and my bosses feel good about what I'm doing. Then I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
And so, that somebody criticized me for having my avatar have Urban Meyer on it. Well, it's the cover of my book. It's not Urban Meyer. It's just the cover of my book. And the cover of my book because my publisher wanted Urban Meyer on the cover. And, in fact, NCAA rules so you can't have an active player, a current player, on the cover of a book. So I didn't really have much of a choice anyway. But for somebody to say I can't be objective because that's my avatar is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, Bill, I've got a question for you. It's Dave Metzold, by the way. I think it would be interesting to our listeners to learn about when you guys write a story at the Dispatch, what's the it goes to, I imagine Ray Stein has to look at it. You got copy it. People look at it, right, and say, yeah, this is
right.
This is sound. Matt and I had this discussion earlier. It doesn't seem like any editor ever looked at that McMurphy story, or if he did, he said, that's a little flimsy, but I'm going to let it go. Just talk about that process in the writing of a story and then getting it into print or getting it to a place where people can consume it.
Certainly with the routine story, yeah. I mean, it's edited, but it's not like all hands on deck editing. It's just kind of routine. But when you have a sensitive story like this, I mean, I can say without any reservation that story would not have run in the Dispatch. It just wouldn't have. It would not have passed muster with what our standards are. And there have been times with other stories where we have not been perceived to have been first with a story, and that's because we are waiting to make sure that we have it right. And if other places, I can't speak for them, they have different standards, they have different goals, they have whatever. I just know that we'd rather be first and right. We'd rather be second and right than first and wrong. Mm-hmm. And because being at the Dispatch, if we get something wrong, we hear about it forever. And we're not perfect. I've made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. You're human. But you really have to try really hard, especially with a sensitive matter, to make sure that you are fair, that you are accurate, and that you're not, as I used the word before, gratuitous. Mm-hmm. I've written stories recently with the Meyer stuff and some other stuff I've done this year, the Ohio State wrestling scandal, where I left out a lot of stuff that I knew or we knew and we thought that just does not serve anyone's interest to put that in the story. And sometimes discretion is essential. And it's not easy. It's an art as well as a science. There are times you have to make judgment calls, and sometimes you're right or perceived to be right and perceived to be wrong, and that kind of goes with the territory. But if you're a journalist, you do have to feel a real responsibility to not just print what you can, but print what you should.
Yeah. Bill, I guess there's three ways to look at what came out yesterday regarding this football team going forward Saturday and beyond. One, oh my gosh, and I had somebody ask me, do you think this is a distraction to the football team? They're getting asked about it yesterday during a game week. Urban Meyer's getting asked about it. Is it a distraction for them? And I suppose maybe it could be. Two, maybe it has zero effect on them at all. They get asked a question on Tuesday, doesn't have an effect on them on Saturday. Or three, as angry as they were, and Urban Meyer talks about loving to have an angry football team, and some of the responses, it could almost galvanize them and in a weird way help them. Do you have any feel as to which one of those three scenarios yesterday may mean to this football team?
Not really. I would guess it probably has minimal impact. If anything, I would probably say it's the third. I would say that they would be more galvanized. But, Zach Smith's not there anymore. The players laughed off the report. I mean, they didn't laugh it off. They were irate about it. So was Urban Meyer. But it's not like they're not playing Brett McMurphy. They're playing Maryland.
So, exactly. That's the weird thing about it. I know. But, sometimes those things cause unity, I guess, is the...
Yeah, it could cause more focus and say, okay, everyone's against us and we're getting taken... People are taking unfair pot shots at us, and let's show the world, Ohio against the world, that thing. I mean, it's possible. Honestly, it's going to be won by whether they can block and tackle and complete passes and all that stuff, rather than it is whether they're upset about McMurphy.
Real quick before we go, does the Maryland game, I mean, you look at them statistically, Bill, they look pretty good, actually. I mean, they got a pretty solid defense, running game. Do they pose a threat in your mind to Ohio State with the big one coming up a week away?
Well, I mean, possibly. But the thing I keep thinking about is Maryland's never been able to compete with Ohio State in the trenches. That's been the difference in all these games that they've played the last 4 years. Until that changes, I don't think that Maryland's going to pose that much of a threat. Now, Ohio State's lines are not probably as dominant as they've been. I mean, the defensive line lost Nick Bosa. The offensive line's been up and down some. Maryland's offensive and defensive lines are a little bit more experienced, so that could be a little bit closer. And Maryland does have very good skill position players. In a way, I think that Terrell Pigrome replacing Kasim Hill might benefit them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's a better runner.
Yep.
Not much of a passer from what I remember, but he's a better runner. They have, I think I had this stat where like 8 different guys have runs of more than 30 yards this year for them. So it's something like that. It's kind of a crazy stat. The interceptions, I think they have 17 interceptions. They have talent, but again, can they play with Ohio State in the trenches? That's the thing I don't think they can do, but I might be wrong. And of course, obviously, the second this game is over, Ohio State's attention turns to next week.
Yep.
The question is, does it turn to the next week before the game is over, or in the preparation for this game? If so, that could be a problem. But Maryland, other than beating Texas, and Texas is up and down, they've beaten the teams they should beat, and they've lost the teams that you figured they would lose to. Last week they lost to Indiana in a close game. Ohio State is a better team, clearly a better team, and they shouldn't have too much trouble with Maryland. But again, funny things happen in football, turnovers and all that stuff. But I think that Ohio State is probably just too strong along the lines for Maryland to beat them.
All right, Bill, thanks so much. Appreciate your perspective on yesterday and everything, and thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure.